Welcome to the Tall Small Show with Maya and Casey. Today we're going to discuss Slacktivism, a term used to describe people and organizations practicing feel-good activism with no real impact on the issues.
This has been a big year for human rights, primarily in respect to the sheer volume of voices emerging from the woodwork into the public arena. From the Women's March in D.C. at the very beginning of the year to the ongoing March for Our Lives movement that's taking the youth by storm, it's clear that social activism is on the rise. Given this turbulent atmosphere, it is important to consider how we as a society are tackling the current issues at hand.
An estimated 800,000 people attended the March for Our Lives rally, and approximately 500,000 people attended the Women's March, movements which respectively raised awareness about gun violence and women's rights, both of which took place in Washington, D.C. earlier this year. Other examples of civil engagement include the protests in reaction to Trump's travel ban and confrontations between white nationalists and counter-protesters in Charlottesville, West Virginia in 2017. Within the span of the past 2 years, these protests have shattered records and made their way into history books alongside various civil rights protests of past decades.
However, let's not get too complacent. A quick dive into the depths of the internet and various branches of social media quickly reveals how massive activist organizations such as Everytown and Women's March, which put on the aforementioned protests of this year, have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views or followers. But what do these mind-boggling follower accounts really account to? Are each of the 915,000 followers of the Women's March Instagram account really willing to set out to the streets at a moment's notice if their civil liberties are at risk or infringed upon? Or did they really only sign up for some lazy double tapping on the screen while lounging in their pajamas with Stranger Things blaring in the background? Or are all of these supposed human rights campaigners just apathetic slacktivists, generating background noise and more data logs for Facebook to analyze?
We're supposed to be human rights activists. I got a certificate from the Sonoma County Junior Commission on the Status of Women declaring that I did some good in this world. And she's on the Junior Commission on Human Rights and produced a 38-minute indie film on the unfortunate prevalence of human trafficking in Sonoma County that a whopping 200 people watched. We're going to assume, however, that most of these views came from some Facebook friends and some doting aunts. It's all well and good until you realize that no substantive change is going to come out of a couple of passive views by a drowsy and wholly uninterested mother. This is a prime example of slacktivism.
The same can be said of those social media likes. Just by tapping the like button, no matter how passionate or aggressive that click may be, won't do too much in the grand scheme of things. Just imagine for a moment if every retweet, like, comment, or post ended some human rights atrocity. If that were the case, the United Nations, Amnesty International, and every other major activist organization wouldn't rely on the ardent members of society to partake in political socialization, but rather they'd be comprised of legions upon legions of just Twitter bots ready to spam the interwebs with retweets at a moment's notice. Knowledge is power, but only to a certain extent.
UNICEF has a campaign in India to end open defecation due to a lack of plumbing. One of their promotional posters advertises an event centered around creating social media platforms to end open defecation. Let's consider this for a moment. If UNICEF's target demographic is rural villagers with a lack of plumbing, do you really think they're going to have stable internet, the time, or an interest to look at a UNICEF Facebook page? I'm sure the first thing they're going to do when they get an internet connection is browse their Facebook newsfeed and like some human rights campaign page.
Or maybe they'll go to YouTube and check out UNICEF's music video called Poo Party.
I step away. No matter where I go, there's no getting away. Everywhere, next to you.
sounds terribly promising, I'm sure. When UNICEF originally made this video, with incredible production quality, I must say, did they really think, this oddly catchy yet intensely creepy video with animated poos chasing civilians around will surely end India's open defecation crisis? I don't know who exactly gave the A-OK and go-ahead for this film, but they surely could have spent some of their $22 million annual budget on something else and created a more effective and, frankly, less nightmarish campaign.
If they were looking for attention and awareness for their issue, they certainly didn't get the millions of views they anticipated. Considering that the population of India is about 1.3 billion people, and the video achieved only around 400,000 views, it's safe to say that the message didn't really reach its target demographic. The problem with UNICEF's campaign isn't exactly the sentiment, but their lack of consideration toward the people they want to ultimately help. It's incredibly short-sighted and ignorant to believe that the money spent on animation, voice actors, and promotion will directly translate into concrete change.
UNICEF's failed attempts at virality are only one side of the story. When we were in 6th grade, the slogan, Kony 2012, was making its rounds throughout the popular lexicon. The now infamous, but previously unknown Joseph Kony, a Ugandan warlord who abducted an estimated total of 66,000 children and forced them to become child soldiers, shot into the public eye when a documentary produced by an international organization called The Invisible Children garnered 102 million views on YouTube within the span of just 4 months. But let's be honest here. Who exactly is cruel enough to skip a video produced by an organization named The Invisible Children? That's like ignoring those just adorable little Girl Scouts when they come to your door selling cookies. You open the door promising yourself to politely turn them down. But then you look into their pleading puppy dog eyes and end up buying enough boxes of Thin Mints to end up in a coma.
As the number of views suggest, a heck of a lot of people saw the video and became aware of Joseph Kony's actions. However, the video failed to mention one tiny issue. Kony had already been forced out of Uganda 6 years before the video was released by half a dozen international governments. People forget things pretty often. Well, that sounds like a pretty significant thing to leave out. This information wasn't necessarily hidden from the public eye. It was more so ignored. This era of slacktivists fail to educate themselves on the issues that they're supposedly passionate about. We're willing to go on Wikipedia and search up Meghan Markle's entire life history because apparently that's the highest trending topic on Wikipedia, but we can't bring ourselves to search for a few simple facts before donating $11 million to an organization with a rather suspect track history of instating other guerrilla militant leaders. Just a wee bit ironic, don't you think?
The paradoxical nature of this predicament, unfortunately, is nothing new. As members of Amnesty International, Maya and I are all too familiar with the reality that sometimes human rights endeavors do more harm than good. Burmese politician and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi is an exemplary example of the hard truth that supposed human rights activists must sometimes face. Human rights organizations around the world initially portrayed her as a literal god and idolized her work on promoting peaceful protests and democratic ideals in Southeast Asia. However, 2 years ago, on some fine autumnal morning, the world's perfect champion for human rights took a steep and metaphorical tumble down the rocky face of Mount Saramonte Peak and fell off her acclaimed pedestal when she resolutely ignored the cultural and ethnic genocide and exodus of the Rohingya Muslim minority population in Burma. Over the course of the subsequent months and years since 2016, activists across the world have called for her removal, yet to no avail.
We like to see ourselves as activists and members of something larger than our own selves. However, this often comes down to mindlessly scrolling through our social media feeds in an apathetic haze. We give ourselves a hearty pat on the back after a hard day's work of double tapping and signing digital petitions, but when it really comes down to it, change is dependent on real, concrete action. It takes work to organize a rally or set aside time to attend one. But change is difficult, and Slacktivism is rampant. We're all active participants of this era of passive and lackadaisical protesting. However, there's hope for change still. Students around the globe are stepping forth and calling out their lax and languid politicians in power. The message is clear. Leap up from your armchairs and into the streets.
Thank you.